over the summer of 2020, the students at my school are required to do a personal project, which was described to me as something you've always wanted to do but never gotten around to actually doing, and turning that into a project that would pretty much make your break your grade. The one catch of this very open-ended prompt was that it had to have global impact, simple meaning it could affect anyone who came across your project. For example, publishing a book, making a training routine, or a blog detailing your time cooking, something anyone could access. In the case for my project, I decided to make a video game, with prior knowledge extending to Scratch and web design. But just making the game was not enough. I needed the global impact, which is what this video's purpose is, to go over my process and how I learned to use Unity, a game-making software, code in C#, make art for the computerized game, and create music to go along with the interactive virtual toy, all within one summer. So starting out, my idea was to make something along the lines of Toby Fox's Bullet Box and Helltaker's final boss mechanic, but that really didn't work out, so I won't go into detail on either of those games. This way of thinking was the brainstorming part of video game creation, in which you have a really cool idea that you realize is dumb and terrible a few days later, and scrap it, only to repeat the process. After settling on an idea, I started to work on the game-making software in Unity, which I had very little previous knowledge about past a few basics. To remedy this, I looked up a few videos, followed some basic code, copy and pasted their code, adjusted it to better suit my needs, and put it where I wanted it. I used the aforementioned Control-C, Control-V, or copy and paste for the technically challenged, to make a really basic movement system and collision system, meaning it could touch something without being ethereal and pass through walls, which ended up working really well. After setting up a basic movement for my player character to start, which I feel like is a great starting point for any game, I deleted it, and completely changed the game's direction. I feel like this will happen to mostly anyone trying to make a game for the first time. After deleting pretty much everything I had, I looked to a Frogger Replica tutorial from Brackey's, the best place in my opinion if you're interested in making your own game or want to start learning how to code. Seeing the code he was using and observing the time before the game had to be done, I decided for a simple approach and used the mechanics from Frogger as my baseline and implemented a new and different movement system, also from Brackey's, as to not just be Frogger. I put it all together over a few days and had a lazy copy of Frogger, made of cheap plastic and non-dishwasher safe material. My version. To note, it wasn't actually just Frogger. The only thing I used from Frogger was the car mechanics. I did make my own, as to not just make a carbon copy. The simple mechanics of the game were, move a white cube around the screen and avoid white rectangles I called lasers. That was it. I had written new movement code, and a way to lose the game. Now I needed the thing that keeps a player playing after losing, the core of all cheap apps you see on Snapchat, mindless rising numbers. I had written code along the lines of, if the player box touches the wall, then a number in the middle of the screen would simply increase. An if statement, as it's called. Happy with my work, I had it play tested and was looking for glitches. This is where I had my biggest challenge. The game was too easy, so I sped up the lasers. The lasers were not the real issue, though. Little did I know the new high score for my really difficult game was infinite. To get straight to the point, you could just do this. At the time I thought, easy fix, right? Just have the two scripts share the same code, and tell each other if the player had touched a certain wall yet. If they hadn't, then to not give them any points for touching the wall. I then proceeded to spend an entire week of work just trying to find out how to have my two scripts play telephone with each other, when neither of them had ears to whisper messages into. After looking through a bunch of tutorials that all insisted they were easy, I finally found a way to transplant ears and implemented
Feeling
it
like
in
I
a few
wasted my
minutes.
time,
I implemented the high score system in a main menu with a few instructions and buttons to press, because buttons are surprisingly fun to press and easy to make. The game was pretty much done after a month and a half of development, scattered around my time playing actual video games and other things I could do to waste time. Although it was done, I felt like something was missing. When I looked at it, it looked empty, blank, lifeless. To put it simply, it looked like whatever Gordon Ramsay called my dish of oats that I thought was a high-class meal. After coming to this realization, I decided to make it look worse and get kicked off MasterChef for making the abomination by making my own art for it. During the development of the game itself, I was brainstorming some kind of theme for the game. The white blocks push the player off screen and you lose, so what could you be pushed off? I asked myself in the third person. Space is deadly, he answered himself to complete a dumb joke. The idea I came up with was the player is a robot trying to close the airlock in a spaceship while trying to avoid the cargo that's flying through the ship. I then got to work on making some art in aseprite using a Roomba with a face on it as a robot/player character. After a few hours of making art and messing with the filters and rendering of pixels, because for some reason a 32 by 32 resolution image needs to be rendered for whatever reason, the game looked worse but had more color. Worth it. Lastly, I wanted to add music to the game, because I thought the game was whispering to me when I played it. "You're bad," and "make the game easier," it said. But because I don't negotiate with criminals, I decided to drown out the whispers in my game with some bad music. Using Bosca, ceoil, this application that makes music, I spent a good 2 hours making an awful song with really low notes. Realizing I accidentally made a song from Undertale, I threw a bunch of musical notes all over the program while talking to some friends who actually knew a little bit about music and had them tell me what sounded kinda alright. I created my masterpiece, put the music in the game, and it was done. Alongside this, I added a mute button because a few weeks later I realized it was really bad music. After the game was completely done, I made a final build and gave it out to a few friends and family to give it a try. I got rave reviews like, "Man, I could see myself playing this for like, I don't know, 20 minutes. Wow, this is actually kind of okay. I wasn't expecting something this mediocre. And you didn't give me a copy of the game. How am I supposed to review it?" Needless to say, I think my game deserves an Oscar for Game of the Year. The second was my sister. Good to know I can rely on family for their support. At the time of recording, my game Pushover is now released on itch.io under the name Deckard because apparently fake names are cool or something. The game can be downloaded for free, but the option to donate will be there for those who want to make a joke on my first game and give me money. I really hope I have the time and willingness to keep working on making games because despite the dry humor, I really had fun with this. And I've been coming up with more and more ideas that I know I'll eventually scrap. If this video gains traction, I may do a more in-depth video going over my code to help people who really want to do what I'm doing. But it will be quite a long video and/or series. I'll only do it if I feel like I have good reason to. And this is the end of the video. Leave now.